While we're waiting, could all the witnesses write your real name and your witness name beside each other just to make it easier for the scoring judges? And just send it in the chat.
All right, this round is good to begin.
Okay. We just received the message to get started. Let's call the case of the estate of Genesis Petrillo versus Peony Estates and Harper Martini. My name is Judge Brown. Scoring judge, please look to the two buttons on the lower left of your screen and remember to keep your audio and video off unless you're told otherwise. You should also have your video set to hide all non-video participants. This means the only people on the screen right now should be the advocates and me. Could the attorneys please make their appearances?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Dara Da Silva, and alongside my co-counsels, Rohit Shazan.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And Tori Leolu.
Good morning, Your Honor.
We represent the plaintiff in today's case, the estate of Genesis Petrillo.
And defense counsel?
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Hope Pattison, and I'm joined by my co-counsel.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Casey Simmons.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Victoria. Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Victoria Cooper.
Okay, unless there are any pretrial matters, we will now hear opening statements from each party. Everyone should make sure that they are in speaker view. You can change that on the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And attorneys, please remember to mute your audio when the other attorney is speaking.
Your Honor, before we proceed with opening statements, the plaintiff does have a few housekeeping matters, if that is okay.
Okay.
First and foremost, for the sake of clarity, we would like to indicate that we are suing the defendant, Harper Martini, for battery. Next, we would like to invoke Rule 615, the constructive sequestration of all witnesses except for party representatives. In addition, we would like to invoke Rule 603, which states that all witnesses are pre-sworn. Next,
Any objection from defense counsel to invoking either of those rules?
No objections, Your Honor.
my apologies. Next, Your Honor, we would like to indicate that exhibits 1 through 10 are pre-admitted. Both parties waive any objections to those exhibits.
Okay. Anything from defense counsel before opening statements?
Yes, Your Honor, we also have a few pretrial matters. If you could type your email address in the chat, we would like to share a Google folder of all relevant case materials with you. This includes stipulations. And first of all, the defense would like to bring your attention to stipulation 11, which states that the bottle of wine was found in the dumpster. We would also like to bring Your Honor's attention to stipulation 17, which states that a canister of pesticides was found in this same dumpster. We would also like to designate our defendant, Harper Martini, as our party representative. As well, would Your Honor prefer that we state whenever we constructively approach the witness, a counsel in the bench, opposing counsel in the bench, excuse me?
Yes.
And Your Honor, due to the online format of today's trial, we would like to ask your preferences whether the counselors may remain seated during opening statements, closing arguments, and objections to ensure that everyone may properly hear us at all times.
Yes.
And may we assume that objections are heard within the earshot of the jury?
Yes.
And once an
before we go on, I did type my email address in the chat, but I think I have access to the stipulations and the parties' pleadings and those things through a Google Drive link that was sent by the tournament organizers.
Okay, yes. To continue, can we assume that objections are struck from sorry. Can we assume that objections are stricken from the record when sustained?
Yes.
All right. Lastly, what is Your Honor's preferences regarding our screen? Would you like us to ask permission before screen sharing, or may we do so freely?
If an exhibit has already been admitted, you don't need to ask me before screen sharing, but I would ask you not to share your screens before an exhibit is admitted.
Yes, Your Honor. That is all of our pretrial matters.
Okay. We will now hear opening statements from each party. And as a reminder, everybody should be in speaker view.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury, may it please the court. Petrillo was the problem. Pesticides were the solution. Members of the jury, this is Genesis Petrillo. She was a PhD grad student with a vibrant future ahead of her in Paris. She was also the fiancée of Casey Soto, and their wedding was supposed to take place on June 8th, 2019. Located in Rapid River Valley, Midlands, the wedding was to occur at the defendant, Harper Martini's winery, Peony Estates. You'll learn today that Miss Petrillo's dreams and goals were ripped away from her when she tragically died due to pesticide poisoning on what was supposed to be the best day of her life. Why? Well, because in the defendant Harper Martini's own words, she wanted nothing more than for Miss Petrillo to be gone, out of the picture. So much so that on June 7th, the defendant mixed pesticides into a bottle of wine that she later gave to Miss Petrillo to drink, ultimately leading to Miss Petrillo's dying breath. Through the testimony of our 3 witnesses today, you'll learn that there were 2 reasons that made Petrillo the problem and pesticides the solution. The first of those reasons being that Miss Petrillo was a threat to the business that the defendant, Harper Martini, hoped to pass on to her daughter one day. And the second of those reasons being that Miss Petrillo ultimately stood in the way of the relationship between the defendant and her daughter, Casey Soto. Now, the first witness you'll hear from today is Casey Soto, the daughter of the defendant and the fiancée of the deceased. Ms. Soto will describe how the relationship between the defendant and Ms. Petrillo was rife with tension. More importantly, Ms. Soto will testify today that on the evening of June 7th, she ate and drank all of the same things that Ms. Petrillo did, excluding one very important thing, however: the poison wine that the defendant, Harper Martini, gave to Ms. Petrillo and Ms. Petrillo only. The next witness you'll hear from today is Dr. Jimin Kwan, the chief emergency physician who treated Ms. Petrillo leading up to her death. Dr. Kwan will testify how Ms. Petrillo died because she ingested a wine that was contaminated with an organophosphate pesticide on the evening of June 7th, 2019. And the last witness you'll hear from today is Angel Rodriguez, a dear friend of Ms. Petrillo who was with her in the following moments leading up to her tragic death. Ms. Rodriguez will testify to the hostile relationship between the defendant and Ms. Petrillo. In addition, the symptoms that Ms. Rodriguez will describe she witnessed are the exact same symptoms that Dr. Kwan will testify to in court today. And that is why we as the plaintiff are suing the defendant, Harper Martini, for the battery of Genesis Petrillo. Now, there are 3 elements of battery that we will prove to you today. The first of those being that the defendant acted with the intent to poison Ms. Petrillo and mixed pesticides in the wine that she gave to Ms. Petrillo. And the second, that the defendant, as I said before, acted with the intent to poison Ms. Petrillo. And the third being that Genesis Petrillo died on the morning of June 8th as a direct result of the poison wine that was given to her by the defendant, Harper Martini. We as the plaintiff have the burden to prove that it was more likely than not that the defendant, Harper Martini, acted with the intent to poison Ms. Petrillo. Members of the jury, if there is one thing to take away from today's case, it's that Petrillo was the problem. Pesticides were the solution. That is why, at the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Dara Da Silva, will come before you and ask that you find the defendant, Harper Martini, liable for the battery of Genesis Petrillo. Thank you.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, counsel.
Can everyone hear me clearly? Perfect. Awesome. Okay. The bigger picture. That is what you need to focus on during today's case. The story the plaintiff just brought to you was only a fraction of what actually happened leading up to the tragic death of Genesis Petrillo. Their story was one of constant fights, destroyed relationships, and deaths at the hand of a disgruntled mother. The story that the plaintiff just brought to you was a cropped version. They left out vital pieces of the story to fit their narrative. And I'm here to tell you that that is an unfair depiction of this case. And together, we are going to zoom out and view the bigger picture. On June 7th of 2019, the friends and family of Casey and Genesis arrived for the rehearsal dinner of their wedding that was to be held at Peony Estates. The food was prepared, the tables were set, and everyone was looking forward to a beautiful weekend. But the guests didn't see what was going on behind the scenes. Peony Estates was struggling financially after the loss of a substantial amount of the previous year's harvest. Austin Lewis, the head winemaker, will tell you about the persistent pest problem that led to the use of chemical pesticides in their vineyards. Due to similar infestations, the inside facilities were sprayed as well. All of this was expensive, and any other substantial loss of revenue could mean the end of Peony Estates. Harper Martini was also dealing with a continual rival winery in Rapid River Valley, which led to constant visits of an investigative reporter and a health inspector. Now, even though the tensions between her and Danny Francosio, the rival owner, Harper was so desperate that she reached out for help on occasion. With all the consistent issues at the winery, her reputation as a winemaker was at stake during the craziness of the wedding planning. In addition to all the struggles with Peony Estates, the relationship between Harper and Genesis was driving a wedge between a mother and her daughter. Miss Martini will tell you about her struggle to accept the fact that Casey was moving on. Like any single mother, she was protective of her child, and she made every decision with Casey in mind. So when Genesis came into the picture, she was apprehensive. But after seeing the way Genesis loved Casey, she knew she needed to make amends. Even though this isn't how Harper pictured Casey's future, Casey was happy, and that's all that ever mattered to Harper. On the night of the rehearsal dinner, Harper decided to extend an olive branch in the form of a bottle of wine. Not just any bottle of wine, but one that was specially crafted with Genesis in mind. Harper knew that Genesis liked higher-end wine, so that's what she decided to create for her. During the rehearsal dinner, Harper got up in front of all their friends and family and accepted Genesis into their family while delivering the bottle to Genesis. Now, the burden of proof in today's case is through a preponderance of the evidence. Now, the best way to illustrate this burden is to picture the scales of justice. If the scales tip ever so slightly in favor of the defense, then you must not find the defendant liable. The plaintiffs must prove through this burden that Harper Martini intentionally mixed pesticides into the bottle of Carl wine, and that Genesis drank this poison wine as intended, and as a result, Genesis Petrillo died. Now, after the tragic death of Genesis Petrillo, Harper lost everything: her reputation as a winemaker, her business that she put so much work into, and most importantly, she lost her only child. Why would Harper bring this on herself? And when you look at the bigger picture and all the issues that Harper was struggling with, it shows you the flaw in the plaintiff's case. It doesn't make sense. The motive just isn't there. Focus on all of the evidence, not just the picture that the plaintiff cropped to show you. And when you do, you must find the defendant not liable.
Okay, before the plaintiff calls its first witness, I'm going to ask everyone to switch to gallery view. That's in the upper right corner of your screen, and that will allow you to see both the attorneys and the witnesses at the same time. Plaintiff, you can call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff calls Casey Soto to the stand. May I proceed?
Yes.
Good morning. Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yeah, my name is Casey Soto. I'm the daughter of the defendant, Harper Martini, and I'm the former fiance of Genesis Petrillo.
Ms. Soto, how are you involved in today's case?
Genesis, I'm Genesis's fiance, and she's dead. So.
Now, Ms. Soto, I'd like to talk about you and Genesis's relationship. How did you guys meet?
Well, I've always been kind of shy, never much of a partier. So one night in 2012, my friend Drew invited me to a party to try to get me to loosen up a bit, have some fun for once in my life. And that's when I met Genesis. And up until that point, I had felt kind of stifled and self-conscious, but she made me feel free to be myself.
You said you felt stifled. What do you mean by that?
Well, my mom was a great parent, but sometimes she could be a little overbearing and kind of controlling. When I moved away to college, she showed up literally every single weekend with gifts and endless questions about what I was doing and who I was hanging out with. And I know she always meant well, but sometimes it got to be a bit much.
Now, I'd like to talk about Genesis and Harper's relationship a bit more. Did you take Genesis to meet your mom?
I did in 2015.
How did that first interaction go?
Not great at all. I mean, my mom had just opened Peony Estates that year, and she was super proud of being able to offer this affordable, good tasting wine. So I'd never mentioned this to Genesis. So when my mom offered Genesis a glass of wine, Genesis asked if she had anything classier. And, the damage was already done. Every time Genesis
Objection, Your Honor, as to hearsay and the statements of Genesis Petrillo under the case law America's Best Cookie versus International House of Waffles, any statement made outside of court is still considered hearsay.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
I don't believe that any statements from Genesis Petrillo were elicited. She was just describing the circumstances after that first interaction.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
I do believe that the statement that Genesis Petrillo asked for a glass of wine was said, which is considered hearsay.
Your Honor, may I respond on those grounds? Because the assertion or the statement was a question, there's no truth value in that statement, therefore it is not hearsay.
Do you want to respond?
Did I hear a ruling from you, Your Honor?
I had sustained it, but I'm persuaded that it's not offered for the truth. Do you want to respond to that?
We do believe that it is asserted for the truth of the matter and that Genesis, there is truth within the question if they ask for a glass of wine or not.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Soto, so when did you and Genesis get engaged?
It happened in July of 2018. It was this beautiful, intimate affair at Midlands Botanical Gardens.
How did your mother react?
She freaked out, you know. She was really upset. There was already so much tension between my mom and Genesis, and this really only made things worse between them.
How did it make things worse?
Before this point, I had to actively make sure the two of them weren't in the same room together to keep them from fighting. And that kind of became impossible when we were all trying to plan a wedding. My mom insisted on being involved with everything, the colors, the flowers, even the location.
Where was the wedding set to take place?
Well, Genesis and I were originally going to hold it at Rosie and Pedro, a local winery. That was actually where we'd first met, at that party. It would have been really romantic, actually, but my mom, of course, had other plans.
What do you mean by other plans?
Well, everything was about Peony Estates with my mom, and if there's one thing that she drilled into my head, it was that Peony Estates was for me to take over. She loved the idea of me running it, and that's when Genesis really started becoming a problem.
What do you mean by Genesis became a problem?
Genesis and I had plans to move to Paris. She just received a job offer there. I wanted to keep it under wraps because I knew my mom would throw a fit and try to stop us from leaving. But Genesis let it slip in a voicemail to her.
What did Miss Martini do when she found out?
She was extremely upset. She said that she didn't care if Genesis moved to France or ended up 6 feet under, as long as I stayed in Midlands.
How did these words make you feel?
I mean, I was really upset.
Objection, Your Honor, as to hearsay, these statements are being used for the truth of the matter asserted and are out-of-court statements.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
The statements were those of Harper Martini, and under 801 D2, they are an opposing party statement, so therefore they are an exclusion to hearsay.
I'm going to
Response, Your yes, Your Honor.
I felt extremely upset, you know. All I wanted was for the two most important people in my life to get along. All I wanted was for my mom to respect my decision to move to France. All I wanted was to have the perfect wedding day, but that dream started getting farther and farther away from me. And yeah, it started seeming impossible.
My apologies, Ms. Soto. I'd like to fast forward a little bit and talk about the wedding rehearsal. Now, how did the rehearsal go?
It went terrible. You know, my mom and Genesis were snapping at each other constantly. And my hope for this, you know, perfect fairy tale wedding was pretty much gone at that point. I even contemplated canceling.
Did you go through with canceling?
No, I talked to Genesis about how I felt, and she said that she would respect my decision if I wanted to, but that she wanted nothing more than to marry me. And that was when she confessed to me that she was worried that Harper, my mom, might try to do something to hurt or embarrass her.
Now, did you talk to your mom as well about your plans on canceling?
Yeah, the conversation had a very different tone from the one I had with Genesis. My
Objection,
mom.
Your Honor, as to hearsay, the witness is using her own out-of-court statements, which under the case law, America's Best Cookie versus International House of Waffles is considered hearsay, even though it is the witness's own statements to Harper Martini.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
We are not offering these statements for their truth value, but rather for context on the witness's subsequent actions.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Now, Ms. Soto, I'd like to fast forward and talk about the rehearsal dinner. How did that go?
Well, tensions, you know, seem to have died down a little by that point. You know, Genesis and I, we gave our speeches. There were some really sweet toasts from our friends, but then the tension ramped back up a little bit when my mom and Genesis started making all these awful snide remarks at each other.
Did anything else happen between the two of them?
Yes. At around 10 p.m., my mom she came out, she grabbed the mic, and she made this big show of giving Genesis a bottle of wine, which, considering how tense things had been between them the entire night, seemed to confuse Genesis.
Did Genesis drink the wine?
Yeah, she brought it back to the table and she poured a few glasses.
Did anyone else drink the wine?
I didn't see anyone else drink it. I didn't drink from it myself. It wouldn't be the first time that I saw her pour multiple glasses of wine for herself. She used to have this running joke that she was a wine mom in the making.
Now, Ms. Soto, I know this is hard, but I'd like to fast forward to the morning after. What happened that morning?
I mean, well, to start off, you know, I had gone to bed early that night and, you know, kissed Genesis before I left, and I didn't know that would have been the last time I'd ever see her alive. So the next morning, you know, I started getting ready like things were normal, and then my mom came into my room and she told me that Genesis was nowhere to be found.
Did you believe her?
Not at first. I didn't want to believe her at first, but Angel came into my room and she told me that Genesis had fallen into a coma.
What did you do when you found out?
I immediately rushed to the hospital. I went with Angel, and while everything, the whole thing was a blur, but I just couldn't believe that any of this was really happening to me. Not on my wedding day, and we got there at 9:32 a.m. But we were too late because Genesis had passed away at 9:27 a.m. and I didn't get to say goodbye to her.
I'm so sorry for your loss, Miss Soto. No further questions, Your Honor. I pass the witness.
Permission to proceed with cross-examination, Your Honor.
Go ahead, counsel.
Good morning, Ms. Soto. I just have a few questions for you. I want to first start by talking about your relationship with your mother. You would agree with me that Harper was a really good parent, right?
Yeah, she always tried her best to make time for me despite, despite working full time. But yeah.
And she raised you alone, right?
She did.
And she had no help from any other parent or family member?
No, it was always just the two of us.
And she did all this while also running Peony Estates by herself, correct?
Well, my mom started Peony Estates a bit later in 2015, but when I was younger, she worked full time at Rosie and Pedro.
And despite being a single mom and working full time, she still made it to every soccer game, didn't she?
Yeah, she always tried to make time for me, and I know she really.
Thank you. I just need a yes or no. She still made it to every soccer game?
Yes.
Every school play?
Yeah.
And even you mentioned on direct examination, you moved away to college and she still did what she could to take care of you, didn't she?
She did, although to be honest, I felt like it was a little bit much, a little overbearing.
All right, thank you. I just want to remind you, I just need a yes or no on most of these questions. So you would agree that your mom is a really hard worker too, right?
Objection, Your Honor. At this point as to relevance, this does not go to make a fact in this case more or less probable and is therefore not relevant.
Response, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
If I may proffer, I'm going to be going into Casey as a business owner and how she used pesticides within her business. And also the bar for relevance in the state of Midland is extremely low. And the facts of this case are very relevant.
I'll allow it.
Now, Ms. Soto, you would agree with me that your mom is a really hard worker, wouldn't you?
I think so.
And she was also a single mom, but she also cared about Peony Estates a lot, right?
Yes, it mattered to her a lot.
Because it was her livelihood?
It was.
And how she provided for you, her daughter?
Yes.
And it was the investment in your future, right?
I believe she saw it that way. Yeah, I know she wanted more than anything for me to run it someday.
So naturally, as the provider of the family, it was stressful when the pest arose at her business, wasn't it?
Yeah, I noticed that she seemed a bit stressed over the issue.
And it was causing financial problems?
I believe so.
Because massive amounts of money were being spent to fix these problems.
I think so, you know.
And loss of money like this would jeopardize her business?
Most likely, yeah.
And in turn, her livelihood and your livelihood?
Yeah.
So she was doing everything she could to save the family business, right?
I think she was doing her best. You know, to be honest, I was more caught up with the wedding planning, so I wouldn't really know.
Right. She actually offered to have your wedding at Peony Estates to help with the family business, didn't she?
Yeah, I had originally wanted to host it at Rosie and Pedro, but my mom's offer to fund the wedding was too good to pass up for Genesis and I, since we were going to move to Paris.
Thank you. So you mentioned that she did offer to fund the wedding, right?
Yeah, she did.
And she helped you plan as much as she could for the wedding for you and Genesis, right?
Yeah, she was really involved with everything. She picked out the colors and the flowers.
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive. I've asked my witness to answer with yes or no, and the witness continues to answer. pass the yes or the no.
I'm going to instruct the witness to answer the question that's asked, but I caution both of you not to talk over one another.
Yes, Your Honor.
She was involved.
Despite being stressed from the finances
Yes.
and possibly losing her business, all so you and Genesis could have the picture perfect day, right?
Yes.
Now, when it got closer to the wedding, Harper was really stressed about the inspection in particular, wasn't she?
I believe so.
Because they had improperly stored pesticides at Peony Estates, right?
I think so, but like I said, I was busy with wedding planning, so I'm not sure.
But you even considered moving your wedding to a later date because of the danger that this imposed, didn't you?
I was a bit worried with the whole thing.
And you were so concerned that people at your wedding could possibly get hurt because of your mom's use of pesticides, right?
I was a bit concerned, but my mom, she reassured me that I had nothing to worry about on that end.
So is that a yes, you were concerned about the danger
Yes, I
it
was
imposed
concerned.
to the risk, but you decided to have your wedding there anyway, isn't that right?
Yeah.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
I'm sorry, may I do a quick redirect?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Soto, I'd like to talk about when you were thinking of canceling the day before the wedding. What were the defendant's words when you told her you were thinking of canceling?
Oh, my mom got really excited and she started telling me how it would be a much better decision for me to stay in Midlands and just run Peony Estates with her.
No further questions, Your Honor. I pass the witness.
No read cross, Your Honor.
All right, the witness is excused. Plaintiff, you can call your next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff calls Dr. Jimin Kwan to the stand. Your Honor, may I proceed?
Go ahead.
Good morning. Could you introduce yourself to the court, please?
My name is Dr. Jimin Kwan, and I'm a medical doctor.
And what is your occupation?
I'm the chief emergency physician at River Valley Hospital.
Dr. Kwan, how long have you been working at River Valley Hospital?
I've been working at River Valley Hospital for about 5 years now.
And what is your educational background?
I earned my MD at the University of North Carolina.
Dr. Kwan, how often do you come into contact with cases of alcohol poisoning and pesticide poisoning?
Well, I specialize in toxicology, so I come into contact with people who have been poisoned nearly every day on the job.
And how did you come to be involved in this case?
I became involved with this case when EMTs brought Genesis Petrello into my emergency room.
What materials did you review to form your expert conclusion?
I reviewed the toxicology and analytical reports as well as Petrello's wine bottle.
Are your conclusions the product of reliable principles and methods?
Yes, they are. I performed a detailed scan of the patient as well as congregating with my fellow nurses and doctors on the patients.
Have you reliably applied these principles to your conclusions?
Yes, as well as I can, I did.
And in doing so, Dr. Kwan, what was, in your expert opinion, the cause of Genesis Petrello's death?
It is my expert's opinion that Genesis Petrello was poisoned by an organophosphate pesticide, which was found in the wine she drank.
Now, Dr. Kwan, let me shift your attention to the events of that night. Do you clearly remember everything that happened at River Valley Hospital in the ER on June 7th, 2019?
Yes, I do.
And once the patient arrived at your ER, what was your initial evaluation?
So when Genesis came in, at first she reeked of wine and alcohol, but after careful observation, I realized she wasn't poisoned by alcohol.
So what made you reconsider the initial evaluation of alcohol poisoning?
Well, Miss Genesis' signs and symptoms did not match up with someone that had been alcohol poisoning. First, her pupils were dilated and she was experiencing twitching and her eyes were watering.
And what was your course of treatment for the patient?
Well, when I first thought it was alcohol poisoning, we started pumping her stomach and taking toxicology samples. But after I realized it was organophosphate poisoning, we administered an antidote.
And upon administering your antidote, how did the patient's symptoms progress?
So it was a rapid succession of symptoms. First, she was vomiting, and then later spasmodic muscle contractions. And when I took my stethoscope and listened to her lungs, I heard wheezing, which showcased bronchial spasms.
Dr. Kwan, now I'd like to talk to you more about Genesis Petrillo's blood alcohol content. What was her blood alcohol content?
Ms. Petrillo's blood alcohol content was 0.16.
Now, is 0.16 a blood alcohol content sufficient enough to cause death or other severe symptoms?
No, a blood alcohol content would have to be between 0.35 to 0.50 for someone to actually die.
Now, let's turn our attention to the organophosphate pesticide that you identified in Ms. Petrillo. What exactly is organophosphate pesticide?
Organophosphate pesticide is a kind of acetylphenphos which can be found in herbicides, pesticides, and nerve gas, just to name a few things.
Was there any pesticide in Ms. Petrillo's body?
Yes, there was quite a lot of pesticide in Ms. Petrillo's body.
And in what ways can organophosphate pesticide enter a human body?
Organophosphate can enter through the nose. It can be absorbed through the skin, but in Ms. Genesis's case, it was absorbed. She ingested it orally, and it was found in her stomach.
And what type of symptoms would a person exhibit if they had ingested the pesticide?
So a person that ingests pesticide experiences a rapid succession of symptoms. The first is usually digestive issues, followed by intense sweating paired with contracted pupils, which was all seen in Ms. Genesis Petrillo.
And Dr. Kwan, are these symptoms similar to what Genesis Petrillo experienced?
Yes, basically the same symptoms.
Would a person ingesting the pesticide be able to identify it if it were possibly mixed into an alcoholic beverage?
No, unfortunately not. Organophosphate pesticide is tasteless and colorless, so if someone ingested it, they wouldn't know.
Now, Dr. Kwan, in your expert opinion, was the wine that Genesis Petrillo consumed tainted with organophosphate pesticide?
Yes, in my expert opinion, the wine Genesis Petrillo consumed was contaminated.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. No further questions, Your Honor. I pass the witness.
Defense counsel, you can go ahead with your questioning.
Good morning, Dr. Kwan. I would just like to establish that, again, that you are the chief emergency physician at River Valley Hospital.
Yes,
correct?
I am.
And you have a specialty in toxicology?
Yes, I do.
So you are the one who is given suspected poisoning cases as they come into the hospital, correct?
Yes,
And you were given Genesis Petrillo's case of poisoning.
yes,
And after examining Petrillo, you ordered a poisons and toxins analysis, right?
that's correct.
Which showed very low levels of an enzyme, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And this was the method you used to determine pesticide presence in Genesis, correct?
Yes.
But this method does not actually test for a certain amount of pesticide, does it?
No, it doesn't test for a certain amount, but any pesticide amount can potentially be deadly.
In fact, this method doesn't even test for the mere presence of pesticide, does it?
But it does test for the like pesticide. Yes, it does.
Yes, so you would say even the smallest dose of pesticide, even trace amounts, is enough to be considered deadly, correct?
Well, it depends on the pesticide, but isophenphos is enough to be deadly.
But even a trace amount would be considered deadly, correct?
Considering that Ms. Genesis died from organophosphate pesticide, I would say the amount in her body was enough to be deadly, yes.
So a high dose, say a mouthful, is also a considered deadly dose, correct?
Yes, that would be considered deadly.
And you are also familiar with the affidavit of Angel Rodriguez, is that right?
Yes, I am.
And Angel accepted a glass of this Cara wine from Genesis, correct?
Yes, but according to him, he didn't drink it.
Angel took a sip of the wine, actually. Is that right?
Yes, but he didn't like it, so he
And
didn't
it's in Angel's
drink.
mouth long enough for him to taste it, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And if this wine contained pesticides, which we already established are deadly at any amount, you would expect to see almost immediate symptoms following ingestion, correct?
No, considering that Angel just took a mouthful and didn't swallow it, so it didn't have time to get into his digestive
It's possible
system.
that Angel consumed trace amounts because it was in their mouth long enough to taste it, correct?
No, because it wasn't digested.
But it could have been swallowed if it was in Angel's mouth, is that right?
It could have been swallowed, but what he swallowed?
And you didn't notice Angel exhibit any symptoms while at the hospital with Genesis, is that right?
I didn't really observe Angel, so I'm not sure if he exhibited symptoms or not.
So you didn't notice Angel exhibit any symptoms? That's a no?
I was more focused on Genesis Petrillo as she was in West Cognitions. I didn't examine Angel, no.
So that's a no. And you have experience with homicide poisonings, is that right?
Homicide poisonings?
Yes.
I have experience with toxicology. I'm not really sure about this question.
You have experience with homicide poisoning, which is defined as an intentional poisoning. Isn't that correct?
I'm a medical doctor of toxicology. I'm not really a homicide detective.
Toxicologist, which studies the toxins that may enter the body, which in your affidavit it says that you do come across these possible homicide poisonings. Is that right?
Well, any possible poisoning could be a homicide poisoning, yes.
And then that is an intentional poisoning, correct?
Yes, according to
That
you, yes, please.
Genesis's poisoning was such a case. Is that right?
Yes, that's according, yes.
And there's a possibility that Genesis consumed a contaminated food or drink. Is that correct?
I don't believe that is correct. She consumed food and drink, but I can't say if it was contaminated, no.
You said it's a possibility though. Is that correct?
Said that it is a slight possibility that maybe the food and drink mixed, but
Yes.
I didn't say the food was contaminated, no.
Could I please have a yes or no answer? Is that a possibility, correct?
I said it was a slight possibility.
All right, so this food or drink could have dissolved and combined with the wine in the stomach. Is that right?
I said it was a slight possibility again, but I said according to the time frame, it's a very little possibility.
Definitively say that the pesticide came from the wine, correct?
I did say that the pesticide came from the wine, yes.
But there's still a possibility that it could have come from a contaminated food or drink. Is that right?
Yes, but given the time frame, it is a very little possibility.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just asked that my witness be allowed to step down.
The witness is excused. Does plaintiff have a third witness?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff calls Angel Rodriguez to the stand.
All right, you may begin your questions.
Good morning, Ms. Rodriguez. Would you start by please introducing yourself to the court?
Hello, my name is Angel Rodriguez.
And how are you involved in today's case?
I mean, how wasn't I involved in today's case? My best friends, Casey Soto and Jess Petrillo, were supposed to get married, and I was by their sides through it all.
And when did you first meet Ms. Petrillo and Ms. Soto?
Well, we first met, summer 2016, trivia night, through a mutual friend of ours. A few drinks in, we all just hit it off.
Now, Ms. Rodriguez, what did Genesis Petrillo mean to you?
She was my best friend, my ride or die. Losing her was the most heartbreaking moment of my life.
In the same year, unfortunately, there was an infestation in our wine cave and bottling area. So a month before harvest.
Ms. Rodriguez, I'd like to talk a little bit more about Ms. Petrillo, more specifically her wedding plans. How are things going with the wedding by January of 2019?
Not great. By then, Casey, Harper, and Genesis were constantly arguing, and it became hard to tell who was disagreeing with who.
What were these arguments about?
Casey was just always talking about how Harper didn't like Genesis
Objection,
very
Your
much.
Honor. Hearsay.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
These statements are not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted. The witness is merely testifying that Ms. Soto was stating something that is going to, if I may proffer, going to provide context for the jury.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, even if it is applying context, I do believe these statements are being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, and they were being said outside of court.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Rodriguez, from what you observed, did Ms. Martini seem to get along with Ms. Petrillo?
No, I wouldn't say so. Harper always seemed to be criticizing and insulting Genesis.
Now, I'd like for us to talk about the day of the wedding rehearsal on June 7th. How did that go?
It was pretty bad. Genesis and Harper just kept fighting about everything.
What did you notice about this fighting?
Well, at one point, Harper said that Genesis should just leave and save their family the headache. Otherwise, that she'd make her disappear.
And Ms. Rodriguez, how did Ms. Petrillo respond to that?
I saw her try to confront Harper before the rehearsal dinner, and then I saw Harper yank Genesis' arm and force her into the hallway.
And from what you observed, how did Ms. Petrillo appear after this interaction?
It seemed like she was really scared of Harper after being confronted like that.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
The witness is not offering this to speculate. Merely, the witness is offering her rationally based perception and how she perceived this interaction.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
I do believe that counsel is asking the witness to testify to whether or not Genesis Petrillo was scared, which delves into the mind state of Genesis Petrillo, which is speculation.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
Under 404B2, this goes to prove the intent of Harper Martini that she wanted to harm Genesis Petrillo. Furthermore, under 405B2, this is intent to harm, which is an essential element of battery.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
Those are exclusions for character evidence. I'm not objecting to character evidence. I'm objecting to speculation under Rule 701.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
Again, speculation. The witness is merely offering what she observed.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, did anything else notable happen before the rehearsal dinner, Ms. Rodriguez?
Yeah, I saw Harper in the hallway walking towards the kitchen with a canister that said pesticide on it. I asked her what was going on, and she said it's because of Genesis.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
Under 801D2, this is an opposing party statement, therefore, and it is an exception to hearsay.
May I respond, Your Honor? Yes, Your Honor.
Now I'd like to move on to the dinner. How did the rehearsal dinner start out?
So Harper had made a toast in front of everybody, but I wouldn't even call it a toast. You know, she just made it a point to mock Genesis throughout the whole thing.
What do you mean by she made it a point to mock Genesis throughout?
Well, Harper kept referring to Genesis as a problem child. It got less funny each time she said it.
And what was Ms. Petrillo's behavior like this night?
Well, it was a little strange. I was surprised by how little she seemed to be drinking, even though she was getting married the next day.
After you noticed that she wasn't drinking as much, what happened next?
Well, a little later on the night, Harper surprised everyone by toasting Genesis again. But this time she was much nicer towards Genesis and even gifted her a fancy bottle of Cara wine from Peony Estates.
Now, did anyone else in the wedding party receive a bottle like this?
No, we all got Horizon bottles. Genesis was the only one to get that fancy wine bottle.
Now, Ms. Rodriguez, who drank out of this particular bottle of wine?
Well, I took a sip, but I spit it out right away. It was disgusting. Other than that, I didn't see anyone besides Genesis drinking out of the bottle.
Did you notice anything else after you saw Ms. Petrillo drinking the bottle?
Yeah, she wasn't acting normally when she got up to dance.
Did you check on her at this time?
Yeah, I asked her if she was feeling okay, and she said that this wasn't a feeling.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay. as to the statements of Angel Rodriguez?
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
These statements are not being offered for the truth value, but rather they're offered for context as to the witness's subsequent actions.
May I respond, Your Honor? Your Honor, you were on mute. You were muted again. Sorry, Your Honor.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, after you were with Ms. Petrillo and the guests left, did you notice anything in particular about Ms. Petrillo?
Yeah, eventually I noticed that she was slumped over in her seat snoring. I figured that she needed to get some rest, and as her best friend, of course, I helped her up to her room.
Now, after you helped her up to her room, did you take care of her?
Yeah, but at that point, she started throwing up. She was sweating. Her skin was flushed, and every time she'd take a sip of water, she would immediately throw it up.
Did her condition get any better?
Absolutely not. Genesis just got worse and worse, and before I knew it, she was telling me to call 911 before passing out on the bathroom floor. I immediately called 911, of course. I was just terrified for her. I wanted her to be okay.
Ms. Rodriguez, can you walk me through what happened in the following moments?
Well, the EMT showed up and eventually wheeled Genesis onto the ambulance, and I was with her throughout the whole way, and it was a nightmare.
Now, what was the condition of Ms. Petrillo after you arrived at the hospital?
It wasn't good. Part of me was hoping that everything would somehow be fine in time for the wedding, but the doctors told me that Genesis had slipped into a coma and likely due to some kind of poisoning. I knew that wasn't going to happen.
Your Honor, hearsay.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
Under Rule 803-4A, a statement made for diagnosis or treatment is an exclusion to hearsay, and moreover, it was reasonably pertinent to a medical diagnosis.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
That rule does not apply to statements made by doctors. It more applies to the patients in which they're taking care of and the statements that would lead them to those specific diagnoses.
I'm going to sustain that objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, after you learned of Genesis Petrillo's condition, what did you do next?
Well, I knew I had to go find Casey, so I got a ride back to Piano Estates immediately, and then I ran into Harper in the hallway on my way to Casey's room.
What was your interaction like with Miss Martini?
Well, it was a little strange, honestly. Before I could say anything, Harper said, Genesis got poisoned. Oh no, we'll have to cancel the wedding. Go tell Casey. Casey needs to know.
Now, had you mentioned anything about Miss Petrillo's condition throughout your interaction with Miss Martini?
I hadn't said a thing about Genesis' condition, much less mentioned anything about poison.
Ms. Rodriguez, what happened after your conversation with Miss Martini?
So I got to Casey's room and she was already dressed for the wedding. Telling her what happened was just heartbreaking. And then Casey and I rushed over to the hospital immediately to see Genesis. And as messed up as it sounds, Harper didn't even offer to come.
Ms. Rodriguez, when did you learn of Genesis Petrillo's death?
Around 9:30 a.m. or so. The doctors told Casey that Genesis had died, and I felt Casey.
Your Honor, hearsay.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Hold on, there was an objection that I didn't rule on. I think that defense objected to hearsay. Do you want to respond?
Oh, once again, in 803D2, these statements were offered by a medical diagnosis or treatment that is reasonably pertinent to this case. So,
may I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, I still hold that these statements do not apply as they're the diagnosis given from the doctor, and rather under that rule, it's more for the patient to give symptoms and such that would lead to a diagnosis.
Sustain. You can rephrase.
Yes, Your Honor.
So may I repeat the question, Your Honor?
You can rephrase it.
Okay. So Ms. Petrillo, or I'm sorry, Ms. Rodriguez, when were you saying that you learned of Ms. Petrillo's death?
So around 9:30 a.m. or so, we found out that Genesis had died, and I felt Casey's world just crumble, and a piece of me had died too. that morning.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Defense counsel, your witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Rodriguez. I just have a few questions for you today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the rehearsal dinner. So during the rehearsal dinner, you were seated at a table with Genesis, correct?
Yes.
And Casey was there as well?
Yes.
And at some point during the rehearsal dinner, Harper gifted Genesis a bottle of car wine, right?
Yeah, it was a complete 180 from her first toast. It was surprising to everybody after all the mean things she had said.
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive.
Sustained. The jury's to disregard the witness's statement after yes, and I'm instructing the witness to answer the questions.
Yes, Your Honor. So at some point in the night, the defendant gave Genesis a bottle of car wine, right?
Yes, she did.
And you perceived this to be a nice gesture, didn't you?
Yeah, it was a little weird though.
And then Genesis seemed to take the gesture well as well, right?
Yeah, she was relieved after what Harper told her.
That's a yes to my question. Genesis took the gesture well?
Yeah, I said yes.
So Casey was also sitting at this table with you, right?
Yes, like I said earlier, she was sitting with me.
Okay, so once the bottle was given to Genesis, Genesis offered it to the whole table, correct?
Yes, everyone declined though.
Well, she even offered it to Casey, didn't she?
Yes.
And this was right after Harper had made the toast, right?
I believe so.
And and Harper Martini did not stop Genesis from offering this wine to anyone, correct?
Well, no, but I don't think she heard.
But that's a yes to my question. She did not stop anyone from offering this wine to members of your table.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, you tasted this wine, correct?
Yeah, it was disgusting. I spit it out.
And Harper didn't stop you from tasting this wine, did she?
No, I'm not even sure she saw me.
And after this, you did not experience any vomiting, correct?
No.
You didn't experience any convulsions, correct?
Nope.
You didn't experience any sweating, correct?
Nope.
So you didn't experience any symptoms of poisoning at all, right?
That's correct.
Pass the witness, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just asked that my witness be allowed to step down at this time.
All right, the witness is excused. That's the final plaintiff's witness, correct?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff rests its case in chief.
All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Please remember that the video is being publicly broadcast by a YouTube live screen. As such, I would ask that all of you make sure that you are on mute and have your videos off during the break, and we will see you after 5 minutes.
Are we ready to proceed with defense, Your Honor?
Yes. Let me get my instructions. All right, everyone is back and ready to go. Defense, you may call your first witness.
We'd like to call Austin Lewis to the stand. Could you introduce yourself to the court?
Yes, hi, I'm Austin Lewis. I make wine for a living. I've been around wine my whole life. Currently, I'm the head winemaker at Peony Estates, and before that, it was at Danny Francazio's winery, where I worked for 10 years.
Tell us about how Peony Estates began.
Well, I worked with Harper at Rosie and Pedro, and one day in 2015, she approached me about coming and joining her because she wanted to start her very own winery and offered me the head winemaker position. So I guess the rest is history. Personally, it wasn't the nicest place, but I trusted Harper, I guess, and I hate Danny, so there's that.
Tell us about your employment at Peony Estates.
Well, my duties usually include like oversight of the growing, harvesting, and bottling of the wine, but I have a lot of other responsibilities that come up when I'm trying to keep the business running smoothly. Harper checks in occasionally, but she's more the face of Peony Estates, I would say.
Being in charge, what were Harper's responsibilities in the business?
Well, Harper's the boss lady. So she handles like the big picture stuff, the business side of things, whatever that really means. She's always got something going on because I end up dealing with the real issues.
What kinds of issues?
Well, the biggest one is when Harper was looking for a property to start Peony Estates, somehow she saw the Salope Swamp and thought, what a perfect place to have a winery. And with this idyllic property, we have so much variety of wildlife, like mites and beetles, lots and lots of pests. So it's been a mess from the start.
What was done to resolve this issue?
Well, I tried to go with an organic method first, of course. But Harper didn't really like it because she felt it was taking a toll on our financials for Peony Estates, and so we had to go to a chemical method and sprayed that on all of our foundations of our buildings and on our grapevines.
Finances aside, what was your opinion of these changes?
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Is there a response?
This was Austin's present sense impression while working with her business partner, Harper Martini. Austin worked with Harper, and this was part of Austin's job to be aware of these changes.
I think the question called for her opinion of them, and so the witness should confine her answer to that. I'm going to overrule the objection.
How did you feel about these changes?
Well, honestly, I wasn't that worried about spraying the buildings, spray it everywhere. I trust our employees wholeheartedly, but I was very concerned and fought strongly against using the pesticide on the grapevines themselves, because due to the fact that we're on a slope, any grapes at the bottom of the slope would be exposed to unsafe levels of pesticide.
Could you explain a little bit more how this would affect the grapes?
Yes, so like I said, any grapes at the bottom of the slope would be exposed to unacceptably high concentrations of pesticide. And I made this crystal clear to Harper, but she's insistent and she had us continue to use those chemical pesticides. But I did beg and plead, and I guess she compromised and allowed me to throw out any of the grapes that I was concerned about. You'd think she would listen to me since I do own 10% of the company and I'm the head winemaker, but it is what it is.
You said that Harper let you throw out these possibly contaminated grapes?
Yes, I actually designed a system where I would rope off any of the areas with poor drainage at our winery. And when it came to August for the harvest, I would dispose of any of the grapes within these areas.
How many grapes would you say get thrown out?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Response.
Yes, please.
This is very relevant. As you can see, we're getting on to further questions to see how this affected the financial toll of the business with Peony Estates, and this further affected the business decisions. And the bar of relevance is very low in the state of Midlands.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
Yes.
Your Honor, this statement does not make a fact more or less probable. Neither does it relate to any elements of the charge of battery.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
How many grapes would you say get thrown out?
Well, unfortunately, we do end up throwing out about a quarter of our production every year. And surprise, surprise, Harper never responds well to this. She always thinks I throw out too many grapes. That's kind of why I like to oversee this process, because I know that I'm throwing out all the grapes that are dangerous. But I actually wasn't able to in 2018 because I was out of town.
You were out of town for the 2018 harvest?
Yes, I was dealing with a family emergency, so I left clear instructions to Harper to throw out all of the grapes that were roped off. Of course, I can't be sure if they were because I wasn't there, and Harper does often disagree with me on how many of the grapes should be thrown out.
Did everything run smoothly with that harvest?
I mean, I can't really say. Our numbers vary a lot with the harvest year to year, so there wouldn't really be a way to tell based on the numbers if the grapes were added or not.
Were there any further pest problems?
I mean, given that I tried so hard to train our employees, it was surprising, but we did have a few citations where we were cited for improper pesticide use and storage, and that our pesticides were stored too close to the bottling area. And 1 month before the wedding, we actually received a citation, but Harper said I couldn't retrain the employees and said it wasn't a big deal.
Did anything else happen before the wedding?
Well, to make sure that there was not a single bug, there for Genesis and Casey's big day, we sprayed pesticide everywhere. And we did have some leftover pesticide, so we threw it in the dumpster. And then that's the same dumpster that the Cara wine was found and tested positive for pesticide.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, your cross.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Lewis, you have been overseeing the winemaking operations at Peony Estates since it began, correct?
Yes, sir.
As the head of the winery, you knew that Peony Estates had access to chemical pesticides, especially isofenfos. Isn't that right?
Well, I'm not the head of the winery, but yes.
Just like you, Harper also was familiar with those pesticides, right?
Yes.
In fact, he told you that the pesticide is harmless, harmful, colorless, and odorless. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Harper has repeatedly told you that he doesn't approve of Genesis and Casey's marriage, correct?
Yeah.
You knew that Harper was hoping that the wedding would be called off, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm just asking the witness what her presence, what her knowledge is, her reasonable rationality is, because she was in close contact with Harper Martini at that time.
May I respond? Harper, I'm objecting to speculation of the witness knowing that Harper's mindset of this specific time.
I'm going to sustain the objection, but you can ask if Harper said anything to that effect.
Thank you. Ms. Lewis, did Harper Martini say anything about Genesis and Casey's relationship?
I mean, yeah, it's her daughter, but I don't really pay much attention to it.
So Harper said to you that if he could push a button and make Genesis disappear, he would absolutely do it. Isn't that right?
Your Honor, 403, more prejudicial than probative.
You can respond.
Your Honor, the purpose of this question is to understand Harper Martini's reaction to Genesis and Casey's relationship.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Ms. Lewis, just to clarify, you do own 10% of Peony Estates, isn't that right?
Yes.
And if Harper Martini was to lose this lawsuit, you would lose a lot of money and your own job. Isn't that right?
Yeah, but growing up with the wine, like in a wine family, I do have a lot of options, so I'm not that concerned.
Ms. Lewis, let me redirect you to my original question. Would Harper Martini losing this lawsuit?
Your Honor, asked and answered.
I'll allow it.
Would Harper Martini losing this case, this lawsuit, cause you to lose a lot of money and your own job?
Yeah.
And isn't losing this estate the last thing you need right now?
I'm sorry, I thought I heard an objection, but I didn't hear the basis.
Sorry, I retract my objection.
Could you,
could you repeat the question?
Yeah.
And Ms. Lewis, losing this lawsuit is the last thing you need right now, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it would make things more complicated, but again, I do have a lot of options.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor. We passed the witness.
The witness is excused.
Your Honor, the defense calls Danny Francasio to the stand.
All right.
Permission to proceed.
Go right ahead.
Good morning, Ms. Francasio. Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
Would the witness unmute the microphone?
Sorry. My name is Danny Francasio, and I own Rosie and Pedro.
And can you tell me about your job at Rosie and Pedro?
I own it, actually.
And what is Rosie and Pedro?
Rosie and Pedro is a winery, and we initiated it like a while ago. So.
Now, what's your relation specifically to today's case?
Harper Martini worked as a cellar hand in Rosie and Pedro for around like 3 years, maybe 2012 to 2015. So yeah, 3 years, and left when she decided to start her own winery.
Now, what was her job while y'all worked together?
She was a cellar hand. So basically she controlled the fermentation process and keeping away the wine from pests. So she would tell me if there was any pests going on in the warehouse so we could take care of it.
Objection as to hearsay?
Response, Your Honor?
Yes.
I do believe that my witness was just describing Harper Martini's job while at Peony Estates. It's not necessarily being used for the truth of the matter asserted, just letting, like, Harper Martini was only notifying. There was no specific statements released about this, Harper, like, specifically notifying her at any time. That was just her job while employed by Danny Francasio.
Response?
Your Honor, I still contend that Harper's statements are still hearsay and they were being offered for the truth of the matter asserted as to the specifics of what she told the employees or what she did at Rosie and Pedro.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, you mentioned that she monitored the pests while she worked for you. Did she work with pesticides while employed for you?
No, she didn't. The only thing she had to do is notify me, and then we take care of it.
And how often did y'all spray for pesticides over the duration of Harper's employment?
Like 5 or 6 times, maybe.
Did Harper ever perform any of these pesticide treatments?
No. We performed it. She just informed us.
Now, where did y'all store the pesticides?
Far, far, far away from any wine. Like very far away.
And is it common to store them this far away?
Oh, it's not just common. This is like the law. So we have to do that.
So are pesticides something you see on a common or daily basis in a winery?
No, not really.
Would it be common to see them in the kitchen of a winery?
No, you should not see it in the kitchen.
And when did Harper stop working for you?
2015, she stopped working for you and she decided to start her own winery, Peony Estates. So she dipped.
And did you ever hear from Harper again?
Yeah, actually, she contacted me in 2016. She was complaining about some pest problem. I don't know, respond to her. I didn't care.
And after the email where she mentioned the pest problems, did you ever hear from Harper again?
Yes. So she emailed me again. And I'm not going to lie, I was kind of concerned because the tone was really concerning. And I decided to give her some advice.
And what advice did you give her?
Basically, I told her that she should keep the pesticides away from the wine, far, far away, because it should not be anywhere near the wine because it could end up hurting anyone.
Objection, Your Honor, as to hearsay to the statements of Danny Francazio.
Response, Your Honor.
Sure.
We're not using these statements by Danny Francazio for the truth of the matter, but rather to show the subsequent action and how Danny responded to Harper and following how Harper responded to Danny, which shows the subsequent actions that Danny was taking in her relation with Harper.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
Considering the course of this trial, it is my understanding that the defense counsel is trying to contend that the reason the pesticides got in the wine to begin with was because of negligence. And so therefore they are offering these statements about Peony Estates and what Danny was thinking about Peony Estates for its truth value. And therefore it is still hearsay.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes.
As noted in the bifurcation in the summary judgment by the judges, it states that either side may still introduce evidence involving facts and circumstances relevant to the events as necessary to establish liability.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, let's back up, Ms. Francazio. So you said that in the second email, Harper brought the pest up again, which concerned you. Why was this concerning?
Because I taught her how to take care of the pesticides in the wine, and I felt like she completely forgot that. Like, how? So I was really concerned. I even forwarded that email to an investigator because I did not want any health concerns to any of our customers, because I might not care about her, but I care about other people.
So you believed that Harper's pesticide storage was a serious issue?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Did you ever hear back from the investigator?
Well, basically, she just thanked me for the tip, and then I did not hear back from her, and I thought everything was good, But then she contacted me again in 2019, and then she was telling me that she's been investigating for a while, they've been like peeping around and stuff. And she said that she finds some pesticide problem, and she asked me if I had any comments about that. And honestly, I did not have any comments. I don't know anything about it, so I didn't give her anything.
Why didn't you want to comment?
I just didn't know anything.
Did you ever hear back from Harper?
Yes. So basically, after those emails, for some reason, Harper thought we were buddies again, and she started emailing me again, like so many times. I don't know why she did that, but
What did you learn from this third email from Harper?
so the third email from Harper, she was complaining again about some pest problem, but this time there was a drainage problem, right? The warehouse was clogged, and she asked me if I had any advice. And again, shocked, because I was like, I told you about this. I don't know why you don't know, but I told her the brand name, whatever, like that she should use to get rid of the drainage problem.
And what brand name was it?
The brand name, if I remember, it was this Italian brand name. You can only order it online. I honestly, hold on, give me 1 second. I don't know, remember. It's just like, it was an Italian brand name you can only order online from like Amazon or something.
Did the brand of the drainage matter? The drainage solution matter? The type of drainage solution that she was going to be using?
No, it definitely mattered, because that type was organic, and you do not want anything that had like some chemicals in it, because it could react with the wine and the pesticides. So you don't want that happening.
And why does the type of metal in their drainage system matter?
Because if it's organic, it's not gonna, giving you any like reaction with the pesticide. But if the type of metal is not organic, it will. And, it could like poison someone and they could be like dead,
Did anything else in Harper's email concern you?
It's just the tone, I was really concerned about how she forgot all about this. Like, I don't know what's going on with her, and she just forgot all about it.
And in these last emails, did Harper mention anything about the pesticide storage issues still?
Yeah, she was just saying that she still had the pesticide problem and all of that.
And did you give advice to her on how to address these pesticide storage problems?
Yes, I told her, keep the wine, the pesticides away from each other. I don't know why she did not get this through their head. Keep them away from each other. And I just kept telling her that.
And you would, do you know if that keeping pesticides in the kitchen is very dangerous?
Oh yeah, very, very dangerous. Like, you could like hurt someone if that was happening.
Do you know if Harper took any of the advice that you gave her on how to properly correct these mistakes?
No clue.
No further questions at this time.
Before we cross, there was a request for a time check. So could we make sure, is that what the number is on the screen?
Yes, Your Honor. And the accurate time right now is 8 minutes, 24 seconds left for the defense direct.
Okay.
May I proceed with cross-examination?
Yes, go ahead.
Good morning, Ms. Francazio. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yeah.
Now, Ms. Francazio, you contend that you are not confident in Harper's ability to store pesticides properly, correct?
Yeah.
But Ms. Francazio, you've never set foot on Peony Estates, have you?
No, I said I will never set foot in that place. Like, no. She dipped on me. I'm not setting any foot in Peony Estates.
So you can't provide conclusive proof of that they didn't store their pesticides properly, can you?
Well, I mean, she told me that, so.
But you never went to Peony Estates to see that for yourself, did you?
I don't have to.
Ms. Francazio, I simply asked you a yes or no question.
No.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Francazio, you were not there the night of the wedding rehearsal, correct?
No.
So you cannot testify to any of the storage procedures in the kitchen leading up to the wedding or during the wedding rehearsal, can you?
No, but again, Harper told me all about that.
Now, Ms. Francazio, I'd like to move on and talk about your interactions with Casey, Genesis, and Harper leading up to the wedding, starting with July of 2015.
Okay.
Now, in 2015, Harper left Rosie and Petra, is that correct?
Yes.
And you were hurt by this because you considered her family, didn't you?
I mean, anyone would, yeah.
It was at that time that you shuddered to think what she would do to someone that she didn't like considering that, didn't you?
I mean, yeah, but I don't think she would go as far as like, you know, offing someone.
All right, Ms. Francazio, moving on to
Section, Your Honor, as to 403 character evidence, the plaintiff has not submitted any intent for character evidence, and I believe that these statements are being used to provide character evidence as to Danny's character for against Harper Martini.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
I believe that opposing counsel is objecting to character evidence of Harper Martini, and I was simply asking the witness if their personal opinion of what Harper Martini might be capable of based on their interactions. It is not character evidence, it is within the witness's knowledge.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
I do believe that they are using Danny's past with Harper Martini in order to establish a character trait that could possibly be potentially her testimony in court. And under Rule 404, they have not submitted any intent to offer character evidence.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
I still contend that I'm simply asking Ms. Francazio for her opinion. I am not asking her to ascertain any traits or character of Harper Martini, therefore it is not character evidence.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
All right, Ms. Francazio, I'd like to move on and talk about July of 2015. You found out when Casey, Genesis, and Harper were visiting Rosie and Petro, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you found out that Casey was considering a study abroad, didn't you?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay. This question calls for hearsay as it asks that Danny found out that Casey was going to be studying abroad, and that obviously calls for hearsay.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
I am not offering these statements to prove the truth value, more specifically, whether Casey actually was going to study abroad. I am simply offering it to provide context for the subsequent actions of the defendant, Casey and Genesis.
I'm going to overrule that objection.
Now, Ms. Francazio, it was at that time, upon hearing this, that Harper Martini said that it was Casey's dream to take over Peony Estates. Isn't that right?
Yes.
To which Ms. Petrillo responded, maybe Casey wants to get away from you, didn't she?
Objection, Your Honor, calls or hearsay. This statement just solicited by the attorney is in fact an out-of-court statement used for the truth of the matter asserted.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
Again, I'm not offering these statements for their truth value. More specifically, in this instance, I'm not offering it to prove that Casey actually wanted to get away from Harper. I'm merely offering it to provide context for the defendant's response to those statements.
That objection is overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, Ms. Francazio, in your opinion, this set Harper off, didn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, like, any parent would, so can't blame her.
To answer my question, Ms. Francazio, that's a yes to my question?
Yes.
So much so that she even said that if you even try to take Casey away from me, it'll be the last thing you ever do, correct?
Yeah, but I think she was just, you know, angry. But yes.
That's a yes to my question?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Francazio, you received several voicemails from the defendant, correct?
Yeah.
And it was in those voicemails that Harper vented about Genesis Petrillo leading up.
Objection, Your Honor. I actually have a layered objection as to the voicemails. Facts not in evidence, as well as hearsay, and to the voicemails, they are still out of court statements.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
In regards to the first objection about facts not in evidence, according to 901B1, in order for evidence to be self-authenticated, the only requirement is that one of those requirements being that the testimony be by a witness with knowledge. Ms. Francazio does have knowledge of this, so therefore it is sufficient. I do not need to enter that exhibit for the witness to testify to her own knowledge.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
I do believe that you do, in fact, have to enter the exhibit. Authentication does not matter. We have these exhibits and these voicemails that she's referring to, and they are not entered into evidence.
To clarify, we do or do not have the actual voicemails as potential exhibits?
We do, Your Honor.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
I am simply asking for questions within Danny Francazio's knowledge. Like I said before, 901B1 says that the only requirement for such evidence is that the testimony be by a witness with knowledge. And as we have established, Ms. Francazio does have knowledge. So therefore, I do not need to enter those exhibits in order to establish this.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
I do believe that the plaintiff is asking about specific statements within these transcripts, which does in fact require that they be entered as exhibits, and authentication is not sufficient enough.
I'll sustain the objection to her testifying about the content of the voicemails, but you can use the witness to authenticate the voicemails if you want to admit them.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so Ms. Francazio, upon receiving these emails, you were made aware of the fact that Genesis wanted to move and Casey wanted to move to France, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, and this is going directly into the content of these voicemails.
Sustain.
No further questions, Your Honor. I pass the witness.
Any further questions?
No further redirect, Your Honor. We now call our next witness.
All right, this witness is excused.
Your Honor, the defense calls Harper Martini to the stand.
All right, if the witness is ready to begin, you may begin your questions.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Martini. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Harper Martini.
Now, we've heard a lot about your winery business today. Could you tell us a bit more about Peony Estates?
I founded Peony Estates about 5 years ago after working in wine all my life. I threw all my energy into keeping the winery afloat, and it was successful at one point.
Now, how was business leading up to June of 2019?
Things have been on a downhill trend for the business. An infestation caused a huge amount of product to be dumped. So even though we were having guests come in regularly, our profits were completely slashed. I had to lay off several employees, not to mention the bad press we were receiving.
Now, how did you try to avoid worsening your reputation?
Made sure to keep a low profile, more training for employees, told them not to do anything reckless or irresponsible while on duty, things like that. After the incident in 2018, I really didn't think that Peony Estates would be able to survive anything else.
What incident are you referring to?
2 years ago, one of my employees, Kirby Doolittle, he left a glass of wine out in an area that we had been spraying pesticides in earlier, and he drank out of that glass and he barely sipped it. And he started shaking and convulsing. I had to call the paramedics. It was a close call.
Moving on, how was your relationship with with Genesis Petrillo?
I am not this monstrous mother-in-law you may think. I never saw eye to eye with Genesis, and that's not a secret. I found him to be disrespectful, selfish, rude. I didn't think that he would look after Casey. I didn't trust it.
Your evidence.
Response?
So I didn't hear the objection. I apologize.
I think it was to character evidence.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Your Honor, I do not believe that my witness is trying to establish any character trait for Genesis Petrillo. She's just trying to talk about her specific opinion and how she felt about Genesis Petrillo from her interactions with them.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Okay. So how was your relationship with Genesis?
We didn't see eye to eye. I did find him to be disrespectful, selfish, rude. I didn't trust that he would look after Casey. So my concerns were not unwarranted or without reason, and I expressed them.
Why did you not think he would look after Casey?
Well, once Genesis and Casey went out drinking together and she got alcohol poisoning. That's not something Casey does.
So how did you feel about the wedding?
I didn't want it. I expressed this the best I could to Casey, that Genesis wasn't right for her. I couldn't see it. And I knew that this was a mistake for her. She didn't have the loving and caring characteristics of an ideal partner for marriage. But we'll have to make and learn.
Sustained.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I didn't hear the objection.
Plaintiff's counsel, would you repeat your objection, and then defense, I'll give you a chance to respond.
Yes, Your Honor. Objection to speculation.
Your Honor, if I may respond, I do not believe that she is speculating into anything about the mindset of Genesis Petrillo. She's just generally speculating to her rationally based perception about Genesis' behavior and what she knows as a mother and what she thinks the ideal partner for marriage would be for her daughter.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
Yes.
Ms. Martini simply saying that Ms. Soto did not have the loving relationship with Ms. Petrillo is getting into Ms. Soto's mindset, and therefore that is speculation.
May I respond, Your Honor? Yes, Your Honor, I'll move on. Ms. Martini, I'd like to ask you a little bit more about June 7th of 2019. Was that the day of the wedding rehearsal?
Yes.
How did this wedding rehearsal generally go?
It was stressful for me, but it went pretty seamlessly thanks to our wedding coordinator, Blair.
So what did you do after the rehearsal?
I went to coordinate with our caterer, Sam Arnold, to arrange the gifts for for the wedding guests that night.
What gifts did you give to the guests?
I spoke with Sam about giving each of the wedding guests a bottle of the estate's wine as party favors. I wanted each of them to receive a bottle of our Horizon blend, and for Genesis, the first bottle of our newest product that Casey had named Cara.
Why did you give Genesis a different bottle?
Genesis was convinced that she had an advanced palate for wine, yet she once thought red went with fish, but she continuously showed distaste for my product, so I created this new blend that was more up her alley, and I thought it would be a nice gesture to give her the first bottle of the batch and a good start at making amends that Casey requested. Casey actually named the bottle. It was her idea, and I thought it would be nice for them both.
So was that the only bottle of Cara wine Peony Estates had ever produced?
No, we had produced an entire cask, the largest one on site with hundreds of gallons inside.
How important was this specific product to your business?
It was our most recent and costly batch of wine to produce, so a lot was riding on it being a success and selling well.
So when did the rehearsal dinner begin that night?
It started about 7 p.m. Things had been going smoothly the whole evening, and it took a lot of stress off my shoulders.
Can you take us through the events of that dinner?
Well, the caterers brought out a delicious spread, and after everybody had gotten their dinner, we began giving toasts to Casey and Genesis.
Who all gave toasts?
A dozen members of the wedding party gave their toasts: best man, maid of honor, a few family members. Casey got up, gave a really great speech to Genesis, and Genesis gave a very touching speech about how she was happy to be a part of the family.
Objection.
May I respond?
Your Honor, my objection was hearsay.
Overruled.
So did you give a toast?
Yeah, I actually gave two that night. One right after Casey and Genesis spoke, and another in the evening as Sam gave out the party favors.
Where was Genesis at this time?
At the main table next to Casey with the rest of the bridesmaids and groomsmen with them.
When did the catering give Genesis the bottle of wine?
10 p.m.
How long after did you stay at this dinner?
About 30 minutes.
During those 30 minutes, did you see anyone drink from the bottle of Cara wine?
Yes, I did. It was meant for Genesis, but I always figured that some of them at the table might like to try it, considering it was our new blend. And I was right. I saw Genesis and Casey pour several glasses of wine for the table, pass them around. I know that Genesis drank some, and some of his friends drank some along with Angel Rodriguez, one of Casey's friends.
Now, Ms. Martini, would you, may I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm not asking the witness to speculate at all. I'm asking her to describe the events as she saw them happen.
Objection overruled.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Martini, would you ever do anything to jeopardize your business or your family?
Of course not. These allegations have brought me nothing good. I don't speak to Casey anymore. My life's work has gone under and it will never recover. How could this benefit me? How could I have wanted this?
We pass the witness, Your Honor.
Okay, ready for cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Martini. Let's begin with talking about your business, Peony Estates. Now, you first opened Peony Estates in 2015, is that correct?
Yes.
And it was your wish that your daughter, Casey, would one day take over Peony Estates, isn't that right?
Correct.
Moreover, you believed your daughter, Casey's life to be at Peony Estates, isn't that correct?
Correct.
Now, moving on to your first encounters with Ms. Petrillo in 2015. Your daughter, Casey, first brought Ms. Petrillo to Peony Estates in 2015. That is correct, right? And at that time, you were able to interact with Ms. Petrillo, isn't that right?
Yes.
Now, during your encounter with Ms. Petrillo made insulting comments about your business, didn't she?
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
May I respond, Your Honor? We are not offering these comments about Ms. Petrillo commenting about Peony Estates for the truth value. Merely, we are providing context for the jury to understand the relationship between Ms. Martini and Ms. Petrillo, and further to understand Ms. Martini's subsequent actions.
May I respond, Your Honor? Yes, Your Honor.
May I repeat the question, Your Honor?
Yes.
So during your encounter with Ms. Petrillo, she did make insulting comments about your business. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Now, in addition, Ms. Martini, you heard your daughter, Casey, testify in court today that Ms. Petrillo referred to your wine as cheap. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Now, these comments upset you, didn't they?
Yeah, offensive, yeah.
Moreover, in your own words, you had never been angrier in your life. Isn't that correct?
Yes, bit melodramatic.
Furthermore, Ms. Martini, you thought that your business would be better off if Ms. Petrillo were somehow out of the picture. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And now, because of these comments, you began to see Ms. Martini as a threat to the business that you hope to pass on to your daughter one day. Isn't that correct?
Among other things.
So just to clarify, that is a yes to my question.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I'd like to move on to some of your further interactions with Ms. Petrillo. You threw an engagement party for your daughter and Ms. Petrillo in 2018, isn't that right?
Yes.
Now, during the party, Ms. Petrillo was trying to convince your daughter, Casey, to have the wedding at Rosie and Pedro rather than Peony Estates. Isn't that also right?
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
Once again, we are not providing these comments for any truth value whatsoever. Moreover, we are trying to establish the setting of the engagement party and the events leading up to the subsequent actions of Ms. Martini.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
I do believe they're offering these statements for the truth of the matter asserted, the truth being that Genesis was trying to convince Casey that to hold the rehearsal dinner and the wedding at Rosie and Pedro.
May I respond, Your Honor? Once again, these comments are to provide context for the jury to understand what was happening during this time. And moreover, I'm asking the witness's opinion as to what she observed.
May I respond, Your Honor?
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, Ms. Martini, after the engagement party that you threw for your daughter and Ms. Petrillo, you scheduled a lunch with Ms. Petrillo, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Now, at this lunch, you found out that your daughter, Casey, and Ms. Petrillo were moving to France. Isn't that right?
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
Once again, I'm asking the witness what she felt and her opinion as to the context of the setting. And these comments, statement, I don't believe I said any statements, but it is what Ms. Martini found out. So it is only to establish context for the jury, and it is very pertinent for the jury to understand the events that led up to this case.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, at this lunch, Ms. Martini, you found out that your daughter, Casey, was going to move to France. Isn't that correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you sustain the objection?
I did.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you. I thought you said overruled. My apologies.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, Ms. Martini, after this lunch, you did want to stop the wedding between your daughter and Ms. Petrillo. Isn't that correct?
Yes, I didn't approve.
Furthermore, Ms. Martini, you believed Ms. Petrillo to be the biggest mistake in your daughter Casey's life. Isn't that correct?
Yes, it was a mistake.
Right. Now, I'd like to talk about your interactions with Genesis about a month prior to the wedding. You wrote a letter to Ms. Petrillo. Isn't that correct?
It is.
You would recognize a copy of this letter if I showed it to you in court today?
I would.
Your Honor, permission to screen share Exhibit 24.
Yes, let's consider it to be constructively shown only to the witness rather than the jury.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Yarongi, can we get a copy of Exhibit 24 on the screen, please? Now, Ms. Martini, this is a true and correct copy of that letter as you last saw, correct?
Yes.
And it hasn't been changed or altered in any way?
No.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff offers Exhibit 24 into evidence. Now, Ms. Martini, you did write this.
Your Honor, may I object?
Hold on 1 second. Is there any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, I'd like to object under 403. May I be heard?
Yes.
Your Honor, the plaintiff has not established who wrote this letter or why it was written, and therefore entering it and having Harper Martini testify it will just confuse the jury and mislead them into believing that this may have been written by Harper Martini.
Your Honor, may I respond? Ms. Martini did actually previously state that she did write a letter to Ms. Petrillo, and moreover, under 403, this letter's probative value significantly outweighs any prejudicial bias it may have to the jury, and that probative value being that it provides intense context as to what the relationship between Ms. Martini and Ms. Petrillo was like, and it is extremely pertinent for the jury to understand these matters, and therefore it's admissible.
The objection is overruled and Exhibit 24 is admitted.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, Ms. Martini, you did write this letter to Ms. Petrillo, is that correct?
Yes.
And you wrote it specifically to her that you needed her out of your life, yes?
Yes, however, this letter was more so a test than anything else.
Ms. Martini, that is a yes to my question, and so much so that you offered her $300,000 to get her out of the picture, no?
I never intended on giving her the money.
But you did offer it to her, isn't that correct?
More or less, however, I never intended on money going to Genesis.
Here, you did offer it to her, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you specifically stated in this letter that you would take Ms. Petrillo out the hard way if she did not comply with your request. Isn't that correct?
Objection, Your Honor, to needlessly cumulative. May I be heard?
Objections overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Martini, Ms. Petrillo did not comply with your request, did she?
No, she didn't, and it made me more willing to listen to Casey about making amends. It was a test, and Genesis passed, so I was grateful, and I was willing to step.
Now, let's move on, Ms. Martini. I apologize for interrupting you, but let's move on to the day of the wedding rehearsal on July 7th of 2019. Now, you heard Angel Rodriguez testify today that she saw you heading to the kitchen with a can of pesticides. Isn't that correct?
I did hear that.
And that very same kitchen was the kitchen that the Cara wine bottle was being stored, wasn't it?
It was.
And the Cara wine bottle was the one that you gave to Ms. Petrillo, wasn't it?
Yes.
Now, that very same can was found to have pesticides in it, right?
You mean the bottle of
yes,
wine?
The bottle of wine.
Yes. However, it was thrown in a dumpster that the rest of our pesticide cans are thrown in.
Right. Now, you heard it said in court today that pesticides were found to be in Miss Petrio's system the day that she died, didn't you?
Yes, I heard that.
Furthermore, the Petrio family is accusing you of having caused their daughter's death. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Now, Miss Martini, you have even said on the day of the wedding rehearsal that you wanted nothing more than for Miss Petrio to be gone. Isn't that right?
Gone, not dead.
But you said gone, Miss Martini. Isn't that right?
Yes, I did say gone.
Now, Miss Martini, you have even gone as far as to say that you are relieved, happy even, that Miss Petrio is out of your life. Yes?
Of course, I mean, I'm happy that Genesis is out of my life, but I'm not happy about how it came. I'm not happy about the circumstances that we're in. I'm not happy that Genesis is dead.
Miss Martini, I just need a yes or no. So
I was relieved that Genesis was gone.
thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Briefly direct, Your Honor.
Your
I
witness.
apologize. Yes. Oh, thank you, Your Honor. I apologize. Now, Miss Martini, why did you write this letter?
I wrote it as a test for Genesis. If Genesis takes the money and leaves Casey, I would be able to finally show Casey that Genesis was selfish. Genesis didn't have her best interest, but Genesis didn't take the offer, and I was proven wrong. And so that's whenever I started to try and make amends at Casey's request. And I really did have good intentions. I gave it my best effort at that point.
And where did you throw the bottle of wine away in?
Dumpster. It's the same dumpster that we toss all of our pesticides in.
Now, how do you feel about Genesis now that he is dead?
Genesis caused a lot of strife in mine and Casey's life. However, I do not wish Genesis to be dead by any means. I am relieved that we no longer have to deal with this struggle and this tension. However, I am not relieved to see Casey so distraught. I'm not relieved to be on trial for this, and I'm not relieved that Genesis has died.
I passed it. Witness, Your Honor.
Any further recross?
Yes, Your Honor, I would like to recross. Now, Ms. Martini, just to be clear, you have said it before that you are happy and relieved that Miss Petrio is gone, yes?
Objection, Your Honor. Compound question.
Overrule.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Martini, do you
Yes.
need me to restate the question?
Yes, please.
So you have said that you are happy and relieved that Miss Petrio is gone, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, you also have said that you would do anything to prove that you are not the one that is accountable for this. Isn't that correct?
Objection, Your Honor. I believe this is beyond the scope of my redirect. You're muted, Your Honor.
Response?
I'm merely asking the witness's opinion and what the witness has claimed, and
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
no further questions, Your Honor.
All right. I think anything further from the defense?
No, Your Honor. I just asked that my witness be allowed to step down.
All right. This witness is excused.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense rests its case in chief and asks for a 5-minute recess if time allows.
I am fine with a break if nobody else has, if none of the contestants or other folks have an issue with it. All right, hearing no objections, let's meet back in 5 minutes for closing arguments.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thanks.
Your Honor, may I proceed with closing arguments?
Let me make sure, is everybody here?
I believe so, Your Honor.
Okay. At this time, let's proceed with closing arguments, and I'm going to remind everyone to put their screen view into speaker view.
Sorry, just one moment, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. Petrillo was the problem and pesticides were the solution. Members of the jury, we learned here today that the defendant, Harper Martini, was relieved to have Genesis out of her life. Why? Well, because as we learned here today, Genesis Petrillo stood in the way of Peony Estates. And moreover, she stood in the way of Casey and her relationship. More specifically, we learned that Genesis and Casey planned to move to Paris, France after their wedding on June 8th, 2019. And upon hearing this news, the defendant was upset. So upset that she put a plan into place. That plan had pesticides as the solution. And as we learned here today, she mixed pesticides in the wine and gave it to Genesis Petrillo on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Now, as the plaintiff, we have the burden to prove to you today 3 things. 1, that Harper Martini mixed pesticides in the wine that she gave Genesis Petrillo. 2, that she did so with the intent to poison Miss Petrillo. And lastly, as a result of that, she died on June 8th, 2019. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we fulfilled our burden today, and we did so by answering for you 3 questions. Why it happened, how it happened, and what actually happened on the night of June 7th, 2019. First, we called before you Casey Soto, and she is going to answer for you why Harper Martini did what she did. And she did that by describing to you how Harper was upset when she found out that Genesis and Casey planned to move to France. So much so that she said she didn't care what happened to Genesis if it meant her moving to France, if it meant her being 6 feet under, so long as Casey stayed in the Midlands. And moreover, you heard from Casey Soto that Genesis and Genesis alone drank the wine that was gifted to her by the defendant. Next, we answered for you how. How did Genesis die? We called before you Dr. Kwan. And Dr. Kwan testified to how Genesis Petrillo died because of pesticide poisoning. Most egregious of all, that it was from the wine that the defendant served Miss Petrillo on the night of her own wedding rehearsal. And that pesticides were found in Miss Petrillo's system. Lastly, we answered for you what happened on the night of June 7th, 2019. And we did that by calling for you Angel Rodriguez. And she testified to how moments before the rehearsal dinner, Harper Martini walked into the kitchen that was storing the pesticides with bug off. And she told Angel Rodriguez that the pesticides were for Genesis because Genesis is such a pest. Moreover, we learned at the rehearsal dinner that Harper referred to Genesis as a problem child. And lastly, she testified to how the symptoms that Genesis exhibited were the exact same symptoms of pesticide poisoning that Dr. Kwan outlined for you today. Now, opposing counsel is going to try and come before you and say that we are missing the bigger picture. But ladies and gentlemen of the jury, they are missing the bigger picture because they called before you two witnesses who could never testify to the events of June 7th, 2019. And their third witness said that she was relieved that Genesis was out of her life. Moreover, she even told Austin Lewis that if she could push a button and make Genesis disappear, she would absolutely do it. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she pushed that button. She mixed pesticides in the wine that she served Genesis Petrillo, and as a result, she died on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. That is why we are suing the defendant for battery, and that is why I ask that you find her liable. Because as we learned here today, Petrillo was the problem and pesticides were the solution. Thank you.
Okay, defense counsel.
Permission to proceed.
Go right ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, at the beginning of trial today, my co-counsel told you to picture the bigger picture. She warned you that the plaintiff was going to come in and only show you a small screenshot of what was happening regarding the death of Genesis Petrillo. And that is in fact what the plaintiff brought to you today, a cropped photo that fits their narrative. Now I'm here to zoom out so you can see the bigger picture. Now they said that Petrillo was the problem and pesticides were the solution. Yes, pesticides are a solution for the constant pest problem that Harper Martini had long before the wedding of Genesis and Casey. If you also remember in opening statements, my co-counsel mentioned to you the scales of justice. It's important to understand that these scales of justice do not start evenly. It lies solely in the plaintiff's position, and the defense doesn't have to prove a thing. Now, they mentioned that they had to prove 3 elements for battery. Ladies and gentlemen, this is incorrect. The plaintiff has to prove 6 elements to meet the requirements of battery. I'm going to go through and show you these elements and how they failed to meet them, and in turn, failing to meet their burden. Beginning with intent. Prior to giving the bottle of wine to Genesis, Martini intentionally mixed pesticide into the wine. Not only did the plaintiff bring no witness that can testify to Harper Martini intentionally putting pesticides in the wine, not only can they bring no witness that can testify to any intent that Harper ever had to put in the wine, their own witness, Dr. Kwan, testified that there was nothing in the medical evidence to lead him to believe that those pesticides were put intentionally in there. Casey also testified as to how good of a mom she was. She said that she even funded their wedding while under financial stress so that they could have the perfect day. Number 2, Martini acted with the intent to cause harm to Genesis. Ladies and gentlemen, there was no evidence of any violent history, no evidence that she ever tried to hurt Genesis in the past, nor that she ever did hurt Genesis on the day in question. They have manipulated their version to lead you to believe that this was her intent. Now, the third element. Specifically, Martini acted with the intent that Genesis would ingest the pesticides to be poisoned. While they still haven't brought any intent that the pesticides were in there, they brought a witness to testify that he even drank the same wine as Genesis and had no signs of pesticide poisoning. However, it is stipulated that the bottle of wine was found in the trash with pesticides and cross-contamination. Next, the fourth element. Genesis drank the wine with a pesticide just as Harper intended. When Genesis drank the wine, he was sitting at a table with Harper's own daughter, Casey Soto, and Angel, who testified to drinking the same wine. Why would Harper jeopardize her daughter's life knowing that there was pesticides in that bottle? This doesn't make sense. And fifth, as a result of ingesting the pesticide, Genesis died at 9:27 a.m. Ladies and gentlemen, The plaintiff didn't even bring up this element that they had to meet in the case, but they did bring up that Dr. Kwan stated that there are other factors that could have played into the time of death that we don't know, including how much Genesis drank, how much Genesis ate, and other possible causes of death. And finally, sixth, that the plaintiff has suffered as a direct and proximate result of not following the following rules. I've just laid out for you how the plaintiff did not meet these rules, and therefore the plaintiff could not have suffered harm in light of them. Now, as I remind you that the defense has nothing to prove in this case, only the plaintiff had the burden of proving these elements. However, I'm going to show you how we as the defense showed that the plaintiff could not meet these elements. In regards to intent, her intent was to kill the pest. The definition of intent is a specific reason, aim, or design to meet a certain ends. The pests were the problem, and her intent was to kill the pest long before the wedding. Now, the second element, that she acted with intent to cause harm to Genesis. As a result of causing harm to Genesis, Harper would have lost her entire business, her livelihood, her daughter, and everything in turn. The risk was too high. It does not make sense. It goes against simple human nature and self-preservation. And third, that specifically she acted with the intent that Genesis would ingest the pesticides and be poisoned. But you heard today that Danny had testified to the history of Parker misusing and mishandling pesticides, placing them in the kitchen, recklessly spraying and not knowing how to handle the pesticides before the wedding. So much so that Danny was concerned beforehand that the wedding was going to cause substantial harm and risk to the guests there. After the tragic death of Genesis Petrillo, Harper lost everything. Her reputation, her business, and so much more was put on the line. Trouble with the in-laws simply does not constitute or outweigh her livelihood, her family relationships, or anything else that she had to lose in this situation. When you look at the bigger picture and at all of the issues that Harper was struggling with, it shows you the flaws in the plaintiff's case. When you focus on the evidence that we brought to you today of Harper's mishandling of pesticides, it shows not just the cropped picture that the plaintiff wanted you to see, but also the bigger picture. Ladies and gentlemen, when you look at this bigger picture and consider all the evidence that was brought to you and how the plaintiff failed to meet their elements and failed to meet their burden, you must find the defendant not liable for battery. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel.
Rebuttal, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, opposing counsel is right. We did have the burden to prove to you that it is more likely than not that Harper Martini poisoned Genesis, and we fulfilled that burden. In order to highlight how we fulfilled that burden, I encourage you to look at what defense counsel calls the bigger picture. The bigger picture here is that the defendant herself said that she needed Genesis out of her life. The bigger picture here is that the defendant was relieved that Genesis was out of her life. The bigger picture here is that right before the rehearsal dinner, Harper Martini walked to the kitchen with a can of pesticides, the same place the wine was being stored, and said it was specifically for Genesis. The bigger picture here is that Harper Martini repeatedly referred to Genesis Petrillo as a problem child. That Harper Martini referred to Genesis Petrillo as a pest. The bigger picture here, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is that Petrillo was a problem and pesticides were the solution. We fulfilled our burden today, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, because as we learned here today, Genesis Petrillo died from pesticides in her system. And as defense counsel told you, there were pesticides in the same bottle of wine that was found in the dumpster. We can connect the dots. Harper Martini walks into the kitchen right before the wine was being served with a can of pesticides and said that it was specifically for Genesis. That there is what is more likely. That is why I am asking that you find the defendant liable. Thank you.
Okay. At this time, the judges are going to complete their ballots, and I'm going to ask everybody to stay on the Zoom meeting until all of those ballots have been submitted, and then we will do brief comments. So for now, let's just sit tight. And scoring judges, if you would let me know when your ballots have been submitted, I will.
I submitted mine.
Okay.
I just submitted mine.
Okay. Tanner or Luke, could one of you text? I left my phone upstairs. If not, I can go grab it to let the judges know.
Yeah, I can text Elliot.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we want to do introductions of who we are?
Yeah,
Or-
let's do.
I'll let you start.
So my name is Marilyn Brown. I am a practicing attorney in Austin, Texas. I've been with my firm for about 15 years. This was my first time to be one of the presiding judges rather than the scoring judges. And it really is a lot harder than you realize to make the evidentiary rulings. Y'all did a really nice job with those. And I'll confess to you, sometimes I ruled just to keep things concise. Sometimes I know some of my rulings were wrong, but all of you rolled well with the punches and did a great job with that.
Hi, I'm Tanner Sheaf. Oh, am I? Okay, just making sure my sound was on. I'm Tanner Sheaf. I am a 1L at Baylor Law. I have done mock trial for 7 years. I did 4 years of it in high school, and then I was an undergrad for 3 years, and I competed at UT. So I love mock trial. The fact that I can't compete right now as a 1L breaks my heart because I miss it so much, but honestly, I don't think I would have time. But I really miss it. So being able to judge was a great opportunity. And I just love seeing everyone compete and miss it a lot.
Okay, Luke.
My name's Luke Hill. I'm a 2L at Baylor Law. Baylor undergrad, also did mock trial at Baylor, actually. So I'm also a former mocker, pretty used to the scene and the grind. Obviously haven't had the opportunity to do it all virtually, so it was nice to see how y'all are handling it and how everybody's doing. But we also got the okay from Elliot to give comments if we want to do that briefly as well. I think the next round starts at 2:15 Central Time. So,
Elliot, why don't you go first since you're on screen? I'm sorry, Luke.
oh yeah, sure. Okay, so I'll just give some brief overhead comments real quick so that we can go ahead and get our hearing and y'all can eat and get ready for the next round. Overall, just kind of an AMTA thing. Begin statements with "May it please the court," just so timers know when to time and stuff. It's just kind of a form thing, specifically with AMTA. I know in the real world that can vary with jurisdictions, but that's just kind of a mock trial thing. I thought both sides did a really good job of kind of pushing a theme, which is another big mock thing. I know the plaintiff, it was that, Petria was the problem and that pesticides was the solution. I thought that was nice. Personally, I was an opener and I always liked using alliterations like that. So I did appreciate that. I thought both openers did a good job of telling the story and kind of leaving a lot of the law to the closers. And I thought the closers did a really effective job of using demos in the closings and stuff to kind of give a really good representation of the testimony and try to frame the other side's argument in a negative light. Other than that, my big criticism would be on cross-examination. Try to control the witnesses with your questions first before you go to a judge or try to get argumentative with them. A lot of times we might say, we want you to answer yes or no, and then ask a witness a 45-second long question that can very be clearly answered with anything other than yes or no. So just be mindful of the questions we're asking. If you really want to nail a witness down, try to make your questions as brief as possible. And then obviously, if they're still being combative, it's okay to go to a judge at that point. So other than that, I thought everybody did great. So good work. And that's all my comments.
Yeah, just to jump on what Luke was saying, I definitely was off put by the kind of reliance on asking for a yes or no answer. I mean, the way I was taught to do it was you have 3 steps before you do that. You blame yourself and say, maybe my question was unclear. Then say, oh, maybe we had a misunderstanding, and say both of you. And then go to, maybe you're misunderstanding my question. And then you go to help from the judge and say you want yes or no answers. Because I think if you go yes or no off the bat, to some people, it comes off like you don't know how to control the witness and you're getting frustrated with the witness. When in reality, if you're an attorney on cross, you should be happy that they're talking more than you want them to, because you can show that you're trying to control them. And then after you've gone through those steps, the judge is going to be as exasperated as you are by the fact that they're talking so much. So you can use that to your advantage and be like, Your Honor, at this point, I've given them multiple chances to give a simple yes or no answer, and I ask you to limit them to that. And I think that's a better strategy because it doesn't come off like you don't know how to control them. And another main thing I had, so many of you, and this was really disappointing for me, it was very obvious you were using notes. And frankly, as someone who was competing in person last year and had to have 7 crosses memorized at a time, I just found it a little disrespectful to the competition itself that you were very obviously during your cross looking to another screen to read off the screen. And personally, my scores reflected it because I think the whole point of this competition is to memorize and to have those skills. And if NATS is in person, like they're saying it might be if there's a vaccine, you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to have notes on a computer to the side. And in the end, you're hurting yourself by doing that. And whether or not you need to stand and show that you're not looking at your notes by standing and doing that, I don't know what you might need to do. But for me, as someone who competed for a really long time, it just felt like something that brought down your scores for me, because I was like, are they doing well because they're actually really good at this, or are they doing well because they have their script right there? And it also, I think at points, because the script was right there, y'all weren't as adaptive to listening to the witness, especially on cross, because there were several times where I heard the witness say something that if I were the crossing attorney, I would have jumped on and I would have used their statement against them. But because it felt like it was scripted, you just kind of went with the next question you had written down. Whereas when you have those moments of adaptation, that is really what shows that you're a really good advocate. And finally, this is a nitpicky thing, but for me, it's huge. Do not end on a lost objection. It just makes you seem so defeated. And we, on my team, we would call them parachute questions. And you have a parachute question that you have ready if an objection gets sustained, especially if you know you're ending on something that's objectionable. You know, there's sometimes you want to end with that like banger of a question where you know it's going to be a really great question to ask. But if you know it's going to be objected to, you have to have a backup. And you can't just end on a lost objection, because it makes it seem like you're kind of scampering away from what was really a good cross. You know, a lot of y'all were having really good crosses and then ended on a lost objection. And it made you kind of obviously lose your steam. And also listen to the judge's ruling at some points, especially in the earlier half of the trial. It was kind of clear that she was not favoring hearsay statements during some of the directs. And at that point, if you know you have something where your only argument is an argument that the judge hasn't been buying in the past few objections, both the witness and attorney need to have that kind of knowledge within each other to cut that statement out and just keep going, find a way around it, find a way to rephrase it so it's not as objectionable, because it shows the judge you're adapting, or find a different argument if you know it's going to be objected to. And then what was my last thing? Yeah, like I said, interrupting each other in the witness. And I know Zoom is so hard because you can't really tell when someone's done. But especially if you're if you're cross-examining a crying witness, you gotta try and seem a little more sympathetic. I know it's hard, especially, I mean, I was always the person they put on the crying people because I was always with the angry crosser and the expert one who was really analytical. And then there was me who was just kind of nice. And so they always put me on crossing the crying person. And as much as sometimes it feels annoying, you gotta give it pause and let them answer, especially those first few questions. If you're right off the bat down their throat, especially if they've been crying, you gotta find a way to weigh that out. And then my last thing is just vary your tone a little more, because over Zoom, even more than in person, it gets really monotonous. And so whether it's finding your lows and being really quiet at certain points and making your points that way, or getting loud, it doesn't matter. It just gives the judge something to listen to, and the scoring judges hearing something that makes be like, oh, something's different is happening now. We're not on that same pattern. And also just more signposting, which is just, if you're in a cross, don't have it just be stream of consciousness, all these questions. Have a signpost where it's like, okay, now that we've talked about this, we're going to go on to this. And it just flags in the mind of the listener, okay, we're going on to a different part of the cross. Because at some points I was like, what point are they making? Because I didn't know what you were trying to prove in that section. So if you're saying, now that we've talked about the fact that there was pesticides here, I want to talk about your involvement at the winery. And now I know, okay, we are talking about something different, and it makes it less confusing for the listener, because y'all know this case really well and y'all have done these crosses probably so many times. But for us, a lot of this is the first time hearing it. And so we need those kind of flags to listen to. But overall, y'all did really good. I mean, I understand that doing it over Zoom is super stressful. I mean, everyone's having things change. Like real attorneys are doing trials over Zoom. I'm having to do my first year of law school basically in Zoom, which is terrifying. But I think y'all did a really good job. I think if you can, before the next round, obviously before the next round might be a little hard, but just rely less on notes, because we can tell. And it's a little jarring, because if the other team isn't using notes and you are using notes, that's a distinct factor someone's going to notice.
Thanks, Tam. I'm going to try to get you guys time to have lunch and prep for your next session. So the only thing that I would add, well, I want to echo what the other folks said. Y'all did a great job. This is especially challenging because of Zoom, but I think that y'all did a really nice job. For myself personally, I wasn't as offended by notes or reading, partly just because I'm well out of the mock trial world, and in real life, nobody does it without notes. You know, you might do your opening or your closing, but you'll reference your notes during cross for, see what exhibits and things are. So for me, that wasn't too big of a deal. But I would say when you're making objections for your next rounds, I think this will just make it easier on the judges and on you. Because of the format of Zoom, there's always a slight delay between when one person is talking and then when another person is talking. And I think a lot of times what happened is I would hear objection, but maybe not hear what came after it, or the person who was the direct, the other attorney might not hear the entire objection. So I think everybody can be mindful, if you are making an objection, to make sure that the judge and the other person have heard the whole objection. So maybe just say objection slower so that they have time to flip and hear the substance of your objection. I think that would help. There were a couple of times where I know I had to ask for clarification on what the objection was or what the basis for it was. But other than that, I think y'all did great. And I don't think there's anything else. I think that's it. You guys can go get ready for your next round and continue doing a great job.